Good morning, and welcome to the Daniel Baldwin Show. It's Monday, the 27th of January, 2025. And today's show, to try to stay topical, as I usually do, is about immigration and about deportation and fulfilling promises from elected officials. Not something we see a lot, not in my lifetime. So, first thing I want you to look at, first thing I want to do, is I want to bring up this chart. Now, this is a chart that shows you in blue for the Democrats and in red for the Republicans how our country, the pockets, even within a state, the pockets that voted Democrat, that voted Republican. Now, if you look at it carefully, you can see that obviously in the very highly populated areas that are blue, you get a lot of electoral college votes. When you get LA, when you get California and the cities, logically you carry the state, and because of that, you get the electoral college votes for that state. Does anything look glaringly obvious to you when you watch and look at this chart? Do you see how much more red there is around the country? The only time I've ever seen it this bad was Nixon in '72, where it was, he just destroyed McGovern. But this is pretty obvious that a large percentage of the country is red in this particular election. So when we talk about farming stuff, when we talk about issues that don't pertain to somebody who lives in New York City, it doesn't really follow their interests or is part of their life. The great state of New York has a huge amount. People don't realize how much is farming land, how much is dairy, upstate New York, and then you hit little pockets like Albany, Buffalo, Syracuse, Rochester, so on. But a lot of it is country. It's country until you start getting down south into New York City and some of the surrounding suburbs, and then Long Island. And even Long Island, I think, is still number 3 or 4 in potato farming in the country. Maine, Idaho, I think, is the leader, and Long Island's right up there. People wouldn't know that about Long Island because of its proximity to New York City. So the interest of many, many people, and as far as the landmass is concerned, is not reflective of the vote. In this election, Donald Trump won. And Donald Trump won. A big, big, big reason why was because of his position on immigration and deportation. I'm going to read a number of things that I pulled up so we can talk about them. CNN, state and local leaders across the country are bracing for a tidal wave of aggressive immigration policies and possible mass deportations that President Donald Trump has vowed to enact in the hours and days following his inauguration on Monday. Listen to that again. He vowed to enact in the hours and days following his inauguration. No, he didn't vow to enact them following the inauguration. He got elected because of them. He promised us that this was his plan. So we have Biden and Harris, and it was their watch that the border broke free, that 20 million immigrants, and please understand something. I want to make sure I say right in the beginning, our country was founded on this policy that you could come here and pursue the American dream. I still think that is just an amazing dream to have, and I welcome foreigners from all around the world. Do people come over your fence and open your door to come sit down and have dinner without being invited? And if they've been invited and you say, hey, I have this policy in my house that you guys can come over and eat if you're hungry, you have to be welcomed and come in properly into my home. America's my home. This is my country. This is our country. No one in the Trump administration, no Republican that I know, no Democrat that I know, has said, We don't want you to come here. Particularly if you come from a place where you're oppressed, suppressed, where it's a communist regime, where you don't have the opportunities you have here. Yes, come, but you have to fill out the paperwork to go to school here. You have to fill out the paperwork to drive a license here. You have to fill out the paperwork at the hospital before you're seen. You have to, there's a lot of places where this is standard operating procedure. Why would it be any different than what my family, all the way back to the Mayflower, and all the people that came through Ellis Island, and all the people that have to do all the other tedious things? You want to lease a car, you name it, you got to fill out the form, just like everybody else does. No one has said we don't want people to come here. We don't want people to be free and pursue the American dream. But there's a way to do it that's proper. And when you look at the motive behind why 20 million people were left here, why planes flew and emptied, you can't write this crap, emptied a Venezuelan prison, put the people on the plane, flew them into the US, and then bust them and dropped them off. Convicted felons brought into the US, paid for by the Biden administration and Harris and the Democrats. Did you know that? Did you know that happened? Did you know that happened? Read about it. Read about it, because the material is available. It's online. You can take a look at it and judge for yourself. So why would that be done? Why was that done? Let's go through the history really quickly first. Why would that be done? Why would these people be taken, millions of people, and targeted on buses paid for by the United States government with your tax dollars, my tax dollars, and bused to regions in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina, you name it, right in areas where, if you look at that chart I gave you, blue needed to expand. Blue needed to make sure of those 7 battleground states, come the next election in 2028, they're covered now. All those people will have gone through the necessary documentation that they're illegally here under. They'll change that, and they'll have the right to vote. And who will they vote for? 96%, I believe, vote Democrat. So it will forever change the Electoral College. It will forever change what party wins in the next 10 close elections. And it was a plan, in my opinion, if you look at how obvious this is, to do so. We did this, the Democratic Party and the think tank and the brain trust, to sway elections for the next 50 years. That's how long it would take to recover from this many people going to these tiny little counties in Ohio. It's insane to think that this is how they did it. They didn't care. And we're going to get into the effect of what this has done to the country in certain cities, particularly my home, New York State. The Trump administration launched an immigration enforcement blitz nationwide Sunday that included multiple federal agencies and resulted in the arrest of nearly 1,000 people, according to the Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Again, I want to come to your house and I want to give you an estimate, because I'm a contractor. Here's what I'm going to do for you. Have you received any other estimates? Oh, yes. Tommy Shalami came over and gave me an estimate on putting in a new deck and a pool and improving my shingles and blah, blah. Okay. And here's Tommy's price. Have you looked at what materials Tommy's going to use? Have you looked at the design Tommy's going to use? Have you looked at how long Tommy said it's going to take him to do that? Environmental impact, blah, blah, blah. Yep, here's all that stuff. Here's my price. Here's the model homes I've done. And you pick. It's Freddie or Tommy. Which contracting company are you going to go with? We already made that choice. America spoke very, very loudly in this election of what they wanted, who they wanted, and they elected him president of the United States. And the things that, unlike many, many politicians that get elected and then forget all about the promises that they made, or have to make dramatic changes and, I'm sorry, I can't, I don't think we're going to be able to do that one. Or just blow it off and don't do it. Sucked you right up and got you to vote for them. This president has hit the ground running on the things that you voted for him for, on the things that I voted for him for. He's not going to wait 6 months and do a study. He's not going. Oh, it's happening now, man. He's bringing in the guys. He's bringing in his boys and girls that are going to take out their surgical instruments and cut out all the fat. And they're going to take care of business day one. Why would you expect anything less? He only has 4 years. So to get this back, this ship righted in accordance with what this politician and his administration claimed they were going to do, he's doing what you elected him to do. Why is that a problem? Look at that chart again of how much is red and how much is blue. Forget about the special interests of being a citizen of Los Angeles. Their needs are very different than my needs here in Atlanta. Their needs, while their houses and stuff and terrible things are going on down there, they should really focus on what they need in LA and not worry. They got an immigration problem there too, by the way. Close proximity to the Mexican border, which is the dominant amount of immigrants where they're coming from is Mexico. What's the problem, America? What is the problem? That's what this guy said he was going to do. And he's doing it. God forbid one of them gets in there and just goes, hey, man, this is what they said. You got to do this, you got to do this. That's it. That's it. When you hire that contractor and he comes to your house and he gives you all the great song and dance and the sales pitch and everything else, then he's got to do what he wrote down. Or you're not going to pay him, or you're going to fire him and get somebody else. Or he doesn't get elected or get more work because he's never going to get the word of mouth amongst other people. It's very simple. Here's the paper that you told me it was going to look like. Here's where the pool goes. What do you mean it's going to be half the size of a pool? You ran out of money. That's not what I hired you to do. That's not what I paid for. I want the pool I paid for. I want this country cleaned up, and I want cities saved, and I want people safe, and I want to be economically sound, and I don't want people taking advantage of us anymore abroad. I don't want that anymore. And he's got my vote for that reason. Those reasons and some of these other plans that he has, I went, yeah, I think this is bad what's going on over here, what's been happening. Let's change that. Don't tell me you're going to change it. Don't tell me what you think you can do. Go do what you said you were going to do. Again, I'm dumbfounded to listen to CNN's propaganda and some of these other, in my opinion, opinions on what this man is doing. He laid out a map of exactly what he was going to do, and now he's doing it. If you didn't like that, if you didn't want that, particularly Democrats did not want that, you didn't vote for him. Guess what? You lost. And when you look at the number of people that he won the popular vote by a decisive amount compared to the last couple of elections, that tells you there's not a huge uptick of people that are Republican now. There's not. So how did that happen? Was there a bunch of Republicans born 20 years ago that are suddenly able to vote this election? No. There's people that were Democrats that don't want to tell you that they voted Republican, that they're tired of it, that they don't want this anymore. And he won. He won. So he's going to deport as he promised, particularly, and the way he's doing it is very, very wise and I think fundamentally sound. Let's do background checks at the number of people that are here illegally, that are criminals, that are wanted in their country, that were in prison and free in their country to come here. Certainly the people that are wanted. I don't want anyone here that's running from the law. And how, by the way, how is that any different than what the current laws were? We have extradition laws to send people back that are criminals to Mexico and vice versa. So if you're a Mexican national that has citizenship in the US and you murder somebody here and flee to Mexico, Mexico, when they catch him, sends him back to us. Yeah, we get him back. He's going through court. He's going to prison. He murdered some young girl or whatever it was. So how is this any different? We have criminals that are wanted in your country that are seeking exile, they're seeking whatever they're doing, I don't care. But they're criminals, which excludes them from any rights in the US because they're wanted, they're running away. They're going back. So he's starting with those people. Thank God, let's get those guys out of here and make sure that our men and women and kids are safe. So again, where's the problem with this? What is the problem? Those laws existed way before there was this problem at the border, which Trump administration did not cause. This occurred during Biden as a plan, in my opinion. I believe this was a well thought out plan, and they executed it, and they just left that door open. And guess what? There's a new sheriff in town, and the laws are changing. We're going to change those laws so that we shut that thing down if we have to use military might, if we have to use National Guardsmen, reserves, whatever we have to do. We're going to get control of the problem. Listen, use simple logic when you think about this. The basement of your house is flooded. Are you going to sit there and keep pumping the water out? Or are you going to pump the water out and find the leak? And then you find the leak and you patch the leak. Then you can go and start getting the rest of the water out and mopping up the puddles and drying everything out, assessing the damage and replacing floorboards, floors, whatever the damage of cracks in the cement, foundation problems. Again, think about that simple thing. We've all seen a flood in the house. We've all seen water damage before. It's a perfect analogy for what I'm talking about. You got to stop the leak or it won't stop, or you can never get to do the other work to restore, and finally the building will collapse. We are at the state of collapse in multiple cities, big cities too. We're not talking about, some small city in Iowa. We're not talking about some small city in Minnesota. We're talking about Minneapolis, St. Paul, New York City, Chicago, Philadelphia, Denver. I mean, big cities in this country that are really in trouble under the financial burden and stress of this terrible pre-planned immigration policy that has allowed all these immigrants here, and they got to go. And no one has said, by the way, any of these people that have to leave because they came in here illegally can't come back. No one's ever said that. No one has ever said that. You have to go fill out the paperwork. You have to go be approved. You have to go through the process. The government needs to register you and know where you're coming from, see your past record, make sure that it's okay for you to have this great privilege. This is a privilege. This is a privilege. Listen, let me just ask you this question. How many Americans do you see seeking sanctuary or asking to immigrate to any country in South America? How many people do you see from the United States seeking refuge, seeking asylum, seeking citizenship in Mexico? I'm not saying it doesn't happen. How many in Central America? How many are going to Guatemala and saying, I want to renounce my U.S. citizenship. I want to go to Guatemala. I want to live in Guatemala. How many are going anywhere in Africa? How many people are renouncing their citizenship, are saying, I'm willing to give up my U.S. passport. I really want to live in Zimbabwe. I want to live in, Madagascar. You get the picture, right? They all want to come here. They all want to come here because of the opportunity and what this great nation is based on. But we're going to lose this great nation, or we're going to really stumble badly if we don't take immediate action to rescue her. So now we've patched up the leak in the big pipe. We patched it up. We've shut down the flow. That stopped quickly. He promised he would do it, and he did. And we're continuing to stop the illegals from finding places they come across the Rio Grande and all the different ways that they're sneaking into the country. And little by little, we're knocking that out. Now, it's not a matter of mopping anything up. We have to pump millions of gallons of water. We have to pump that water out because the ship is sinking. The basement is filled to the roof with water, not like, a foot of water and you're walking around in it wondering, how bad's the floor going to be. You're floating in the basement right now. That's how much water. It's almost up to the next floor. So we have to pump that water out. We have to get all the bad people out of here first. Then we got to organize it all and return people to their proper countries and alleviate this terrible pressure in some of our biggest cities. Federal agents with top Trump administration officials and right-wing media personality Dr. Phil McGraw in tow descended on Chicago Sunday for a series of targeted immigration arrests across the Chicago area, capping off a week of fear and confusion as the Fed set out to enforce the president's mass deportation pledge. Again, we put these sensational articles up. We make it seem like, this man has no heart or this man has no compassion. That's the furthest from the truth. I have met Donald Trump. I have spent time, I've worked with him, I've worked for him. No, we're not best friends. No, we don't text each other each day. I respect his vigor and his conviction because I believe he absolutely believes that he's going to save this country, and that's what he did this for. He didn't need this job. He didn't need this headache. At his age right now, you'd think you'd want to take all that money and kick back with Melania and watch his children do really, really well and, live another 5, 10, 20. I hope he lives as long as he wants to live. But he didn't need this job. And unlike any other president who has gone into the White House, any other ever president that has gone into the White House and left and then made more money, Trump's lost hundreds of millions of dollars, billions probably of dollars, but certainly hundreds of millions. He's lost more money than any president has ever made. Combined, Obama, Clinton, Clinton's made a lot of money and they're still making a lot of money. Now, this guy lost more money, threw it away because he could not watch the country fall apart like this. And so, again, I just don't understand. I don't understand why anyone is surprised at what's happening right now in Chicago. Why are you surprised? I had this argument with a very good friend of mine, an attorney. And she said to me, well, do you really think that the people of Chicago want, National Guardsmen or they want reserves coming in carrying rifles in these towns or in these areas? And I said, yes, the law-abiding ones do. If you're a mom and you have 2 kids and you're in Chicago and you're overrun with immigrants who are lawless, who don't care, who will rob you, who will rape you, who will kill you, who have made the streets unsafe for your children to even walk to school because of gang violence in addition in Chicago. The gangs are really, really tough there, man, and they're fighting each other quite a bit. And they've turned certain areas, the infamous Cabrini Greens and, and other areas of Chicago into war zones. They're born from that area. They're in the same apartment they were raised in. Their grandmother is still there. Yes, I believe that they do. They need something to happen, or they're subjecting their children with no law and order. So to be part of this system and cycle through and do the same thing. So where's the hope in that? Where's the hope in that for the mom or the family or the children who look around them and say, am I going to get out of this alive? I remember when I shot Homicide: Life on the Streets, this wonderful television series I shot in Baltimore. And I sat with a young man. We were shooting in the building that when David Simon wrote the book, the actual murder took place. And the family still lived in the apartment. And we're shooting there and they needed the money. They needed the money. So they paid to shoot in this apartment. And one of the kids was probably, I'll make up his name, he was Jimmy, he was 17, and he had multiple beepers. Beep, 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 beep. At the time I smoked, so I was often out on the front porch. We're Pennsylvania Avenue, one of those areas in Baltimore that was pretty hot at the time, in the early 90s. I remember his beep would go off, he'd smoke a cigarette with me, he'd take off, and he'd be back in 10 minutes, and it was quite apparent what he was doing. And I said to him, aren't you scared that you're going to get caught? I mean, everybody on this set knows what you do. And he went, nah, not really. He said to me, he goes, what do you want me to do, Mr. Baldwin? You want me to go to McWork? He said, McWork. And I looked at him and I smiled because obviously that meant McDonald's. And I said, why McWork would be such a bad thing? He said, I have 3 sisters and 2 brothers that are younger than me. And he took me, he said, come here for a minute. And he actually physically grabbed my jacket. We were shooting scenes upstairs and I wasn't in the next couple of shots. So I was hanging out front, watching the scene and, in this kind of funky area in Baltimore. And he walked me out to the middle of the street and he looked down and he pointed, he said, you see that? I'm already in prison. My father My two uncles, they're already in jail. They're in prison right now. I am the man of the house at 17. I support my mom. I give her the money with what I do out here on the street. He said, what's the downside? I got to go to jail and be with my father and my uncles and go work out and eat, hang out with my friends, and come back out in a few years. He goes, and if I get a big stretch, I get a big stretch. But this, and he pointed around them, this is jail. I went in my trailer. I went in my trailer and I cried for this boy. This is an articulate, young, handsome, 17-year-old man who, I didn't look at him and say, oh, he could have been a great athlete. This guy could have been a lawyer. This guy could have been a doctor. This guy could have been, a game changer that contributed to society. And in his life, because of where he was, he already felt like he lost all his freedom. That's happening in this country right now. It's happening to the whole country. People are losing hope. They're losing hope. I don't believe that the past few administrations have really cared about us. I don't believe that. I don't believe they could do the things that are going to come out in the next 4 years that they did. Vaccines and COVID, spreading of the disease, and selling us out to other countries, and the border and immigration and Ukraine and China, and the number of stuff that's going to come out and the things that we're going to learn about what's happened. I'm losing hope. What am I going to tell my son I did? What am I going to tell him how I contributed? And that's when I realized it has to radically change now. The old way has to change. There has to be, revolution or civil unrest and a powerful change in the direction that this country is going in. Or man, it's going to break out. It's going to get violent. It's going to get really bad. This is going to be one of those, British, American, contingency is going to take it away, the powers from Great Britain. And it's going to be that kind of thing. I'm serious. I really think it's going to be that way if we don't get a handle on it right now, like right now. So the immediacy of this president and his administration doing the things that we elected him for. This is what he ran on. And we said, go, man. We believe what you're doing is right. And now we read all this crap where people are acting like they didn't know what was coming. No, what you didn't realize was he was actually going to do it. What you didn't realize because of past elections and past politicians who promised you all these different things and they didn't do them. What you didn't realize is that you're fed information. Oh, look at how many more jobs there are now since Biden. Biden came in and there had been a terrible COVID virus that millions and millions and millions of people were out of work as a result of them intentionally, in my opinion, releasing this virus and killing Americans, killing people worldwide. Millions of people died as a result of this. And if they can prove it, which I believe they can, it was actually intentional. It was done intentionally, in my opinion. So that's the world. That's the way we're heading right now. That's what's happened. And I think we're trying to change that. Let me read this to you. What cities are experiencing the most migrants? New York City says that since 2022, it has received more than 200,000 migrants, which would be the largest number by far, followed by Chicago and Denver, about 40,000 each, and in lesser extent, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Los Angeles, and Boston. I'm from New York. I grew up in New York. I grew up on Long Island. I lived in Manhattan for years. I still obviously identify, you might hear a little bit of my voice, not too bad, but I identify as a New Yorker. Um, New York, across the nation and around the world, gets a bad reputation sometimes because you see it as such this big, violent, crazy city, but nobody has a heart like the heart of a New Yorker. No, there are no fans like Giant fans and Yankee fans, and and all of our sports. And actually, if you walk up to somebody in New York and you say, "Hey, man, do you know where?" Yeah, yeah. You go down here, you go over there, you make a left. Third Avenue, right here. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 blocks. Make a left. Vito's, a big sign says Vito's Pizza. I love Vito's Pizza. If you want to stop, go ahead. And that's New York. And people are very engaging, very animated, and it's a great city. Since 9/11, that was a big blow to New York. Losing those two towers, having something happen on our homeland, unlike Vietnam and throughout the Middle East, Korea, the wars that we've had. This happened at home. This happened, to the greatest city in the country. But when I look at New York right now, when I look at, you don't understand, 200,000 people. That's a lot of people. There are people all over the city with no homes that were bought in by the Biden administration, by Harris and Harris's people at the border, and bussed. I mean, think about how far Mexico is from New York. Here's the U.S. Here's the U.S. Florida's all the way down here. All the way down there. I'm going to do it like that. There's Florida. You got to go through all those states through Texas or California or Arizona before you get to New York, which is in the northeast. How'd they get there? I mean, they walked, or they were flown in, caravans, whatever they did, wherever they crossed, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas. That's quite a ways to go through Texas and all those states, all the way through Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, keep going up, Washington, D.C., Maryland, Pennsylvania, before you get to New York City. How'd they do that? These people didn't Uber there. They were bought there. They were transported there. They didn't have friends waiting for them. Tommy, taxi! No. They were delivered to New York. What do you think New York can do about that? Where do you think that money's going to come from to support those people that are overburdening the load on New York City? The island of Manhattan, I don't know if you realize this, the island of Manhattan is 13 miles long and 3.5 miles wide. That's it. 10 million on that little spot. Super congested. And I'm going to throw 200,000 people into that little island and wonder where everyone's going to go and how it's going to be paid for. Officials in New York are assembling tent cities for those who can't be placed in shelter system of more than 200 hotels and other facilities that is already housing 60,000 migrants, more than 50,000 homeless residents. In Chicago, which is housing over 7,000 migrants, police stations and parks have been converted into makeshift shelters, and plans to house asylum seekers in vacant schools have generated fervent local backlash. So, 200 hotels. I don't know how big are these hotels. They have 20 rooms. They have 100 rooms. There's 200,000 people that didn't have homes when they first arrived. How is the city going to survive? Imagine your town. Just break it down to a smaller understanding. Imagine the budget that your school that your kids go to is $100. And right now, they're not running at a surplus. Everyone's usually just about right at the budget. And you have 1,000 students at the school, and I throw another 80 kids into the school. Figure out where to put them in classrooms, figure out where they're going. You don't even know where they're going to live. These kids all have to go to school. These kids all have to eat. We're paying for them to have a cell phone for the family. We're paying for them to stay in a hotel. We're paying for their food. We're giving them clothes. We're giving them medical and health care. Again, I'm not against any of this to help these people and be a helping hand. But at the same time, there's people that can't pay for their groceries that are Americans that have been here for generations and are really, really struggling. There's firemen's families that were killed at 9/11 that they don't have a dad anymore and they need help. There's soldiers that have defended this country, gone thousands and thousands of miles away to fight wars to protect our way of life. And I'm going to tell the guy that has no arm left from an RPG blowing his arm off, so he doesn't have the same skill set anymore. He did when he drove that tank and defended your right to be an American and be free here. But I don't have the money to get him the new arm that he needs with the hand that works, the prosthetic thing. I don't have the money for that. Because I got 200,000 migrants in New York City. And this guy's going to a veterans hospital in New York saying, hey, not for nothing, but if I had that other arm, I could still drive a van, or I could still do, we owe him that. We owe him that. Again, I'm getting further down the line of like how ridiculous this is, that people are criticizing this president for doing exactly what he got elected for. But we are, please listen to me, we're in trouble. Chicago's in trouble, man. The great city in the Midwest, the spot. So many of my friends, I think back to guys that I've known that came out of Chicago that I've always admired. John Cusack, we don't agree politically all the time, John and I. I look at some of the stuff he writes on X and Twitter, formerly Twitter, and I go, what is Johnny talking about there? But the Cusack family, acting legends, and their parents, known throughout the acting community as some of the highest grade, highest level acting teachers ever to come out of Illinois. And I love that family. I'm always watching their movies, Joni, and their whole family is just so talented. We're losing Chicago. We're losing it. We're talking about cities that are gonna burst. Something really bad's gonna happen. Either it's gonna implode, or they're gonna go bankrupt. I don't know what happens if a city goes bankrupt. Who's gonna bail them out? I would imagine that the federal government would have to step in, again, our tax dollars, because we allowed all these people to come in. Do you see the cycle of how this is going? That people that are going to go for a certain amount of time with not having the have-nots, if you will, and that disparaging gap over the 1% of the population that controls 98% of the money or some nonsense. It's some crazy number like that percentage. But what are we going to wait for? Are we going to wait for it to blow? You're watching the volcano and you're like, evacuate. Mount St. Helens warned all the people. All indications are that this thing is going to absolutely blow up. Some people didn't go, and it blew. It's coming. It's coming. If we don't act now, and we don't do exactly what we're doing, let's trim some of this, get some of these people out of here. Hopefully, Mexico can jump in and do the right thing by their citizens. But these people need to go to alleviate the tremendous financial pressure and the violence that's going on, the lawlessness that's going on. I fully support it. I think that we are doing the right thing. And I certainly think this, he's doing exactly what he said he was going to do and exactly why we elected him to do it. So I don't see the problem, but let me read on. Mexico denied a U.S. military plane access to land Thursday, at least temporarily frustrating the Trump administration plans to deport immigrants to the country, according to 2 U.S. defense officials and a third person familiar with the situation. 2 Guatemala-bound Air Force C-17s carrying about 80 people apiece flew deportees out of the U.S. Thursday night that sources said the third flight slotted for Mexico never took off. You know what? I'm going to connect these two now because I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. there was a now famous flight that was on its way to Colombia, back to South America. And the president of Colombia, in the news yesterday, 2 days ago, denied access for the planes to land with the Colombian citizens on it that were illegally in the United States. Again, I mean, we're not going to start a war with Colombia. We're not going to start a physical intervention of any kind. But the president isn't messing around. So he let the president of Colombia know that severe sanctions, if we cannot have access to bringing back your citizens that are in our country illegally, will follow. We will make it really, really uncomfortable for you to do business, and we will make it really, really expensive for you to do business with the United States through a tariff system that will be designed to penalize you for not allowing us to bring these people back peacefully back to your country. Now, of course, that first few loads included a number of people that were wanted in Colombia, that were on their bad boy lists. And Colombia then turned around. I'm shocked at this too. I'm shocked the president succumbed to this pressure. He went, cost us hundreds of millions, billions of dollars. Let the planes land and bring back 160 people that were in the U.S. illegally. And that's just the beginning. And guess what? He changed his tone pretty quick. Sometimes when you're sitting in a bar and the guy comes over and he's got a really big mouth and he's insulting the women and he's saying, and you're a pretty big guy, sometimes all you got to do is stand up. Sometimes he takes a look at the size of your arms. He takes a look that you're 6'3", that you weigh 225, and you look like you know how to handle yourself. You don't have to say anything else. It's called puffing your chest out a little bit, flexing your muscle a little bit, to remind them who they're dealing with, to remind them, I'm not going to roll over. The U.S. got some pretty big arms. The U.S. has a pretty big chest. Is a good 6'6", 6'7", big boys influence-wise around the globe. And Colombia, God bless some lovely country in South America, I don't think wants to mess with Donald Trump and the U.S. And Trump reminded them, this is what we're going to do. We're not going to beat you up. We're going to remind you why we're the U.S. and why you're Colombia. If you want that, and you don't want to take these people back, that's fine. You'll face that. They backed off in one day. They said, please bring the people back. That's fine. We'll figure it out. Now, in Mexico, which I just read to you, Mexico and the United States have a lot more financial ties than Colombia. I promise you, we do not import that many things from Colombia to the U.S. that we can't live without. So that would be inconvenient for us to have to sanction Mexico, because we do have a lot of interest in Mexico. They're a bordering country. We have a lot of tourism that we do with Mexico. We have a lot of financial interest from so many of the Mexican business people that invest in the U.S. We have a lot of industry and many, many things that are built, including in the auto industry in Mexico, that they bring over here. Should the Mexican government make the mistake that initially the Colombian government did, I promise you, the Mexican government would be ill-advised to have a special tariff put on them on imports. I'm going to guess, I don't know the numbers, but I could probably look it up, of how dependent the Mexican government is and how dependent the Mexican people are of the trade that they do with the United States. I mean, it's astronomical. Very similar, of course, to our neighbors in Canada, where 96%, now think about this number again. This is not true of Mexico, but this is true of Canada. 96% of the Canadian population lives within a 200-mile border of the U.S. So look at their cities: Vancouver, Calgary, Manitoba, and you just go right across Toronto. But it's all that southern belt, because they do a lot of business with the U.S., a lot. in my business, the film business, we have always had a lovely relationship with Canada. We go up there, they give a really good tax deals. We've set up production, particularly in Vancouver and in Toronto. But if it came down to, with Trudeau just stepping down, the Canadian government acting unfavorably or not taking back citizens that escaped or crossed the border illegally or whatever the situation was, I think we're going to live in the U.S. and get by without the number of things Canada supplies to us that we need. Keep in mind, Canada doesn't make any cars. Canada doesn't make a lot of things that we make that we send up to Canada. A lot of things. Besides some coal that they send over to China and some other things they do, Canada lives and imports a lot of things that the U.S. makes for them. So it's not vice versa. It's not Canadians that are living because they're so dependent, U.S. is on their products. It's vice versa, same as it is in Mexico. So I'm going to tell you that Mexico is going to face severe warnings of tariffs that will be placed on them if they don't take their people back. I don't know that they have much of a choice. I believe that it would be wise of them socioeconomically to open up some type of agreement with the U.S. of how we're going to bring those people back to Mexico in a safe, humane, and peaceful way. I don't want families to be broken up. I don't want anything to be done, especially for the kids, that makes them feel that they're being jailed or arrested or anything. I mean, this has to be done with some class. So I'm pretty sure that that's how it's going to go, and I'll continue to talk about this as time goes on. I wanted to read this last article. Vice President J.D. Vance clashed with CBS host Margaret Brennan Sunday morning when the Republican defended President Trump's decision to halt a refugee program that quickly barred hundreds of Afghans from reaching the U.S. last week. Vance tore into Brennan during the sit-down interview on Face the Nation, arguing the vetting process of refugees currently undergoing is not thorough enough, and that his primary concern to the vice president is to look after the American people. So, again, now this is Afghanistan. Does that ring a bell to anybody? Afghanistan, where Biden and the administration pulled our boys and girls out of very abruptly, left billions of dollars worth of machinery, war machines, trucks, bombs, weapons, ammunition, helicopters, planes. I mean, we just walked away. Our boys and girls died at that airport. 13 at a funeral procession where Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have still never mentioned their name in public. Never said their names. They've never taken any responsibility for how embarrassing all those years that we spent over there to try to fight off the Taliban and to try to do the right thing by those people. And we left our boys. I mean, you've seen the videos of the airport and how awful that whole thing was. We left a whole bunch of our guys and girls there, totally unprotected. And so this Margaret Brennan woman on Face the Nation wants to criticize that our vice president, by the way, a U.S. Marine who went over to the Middle East and served his country in a war state, in a war zone, served his country honorably, is saying, no, listen, before we start letting people that we just got out of a war with come into this country, we have to be extra careful who we're going to let in. We have to be, in World War II, we took Japanese and put them in camps, internment camps. We made them live on, these big tented farms in California because we were worried about their connections back to Japan. These were US citizens. These were people that had already been here for generations. Didn't matter. If you were Japanese descent, a lot of people got locked up. People don't realize that went on, that was a real backlash of hatred towards the Japanese. Obviously, the bombing of Pearl Harbor, that didn't represent every Japanese person. And guess what? What happened in Afghanistan doesn't represent every Afghanistanian that lives in the U.S. now or has been living in the U.S. I'd say it probably put you on a list that, we want to make sure, you're not doing anything crazy, because terrorism is way different than war. But these are new people that are coming over. Yes, I want them vetted really carefully. I want to make sure that the open policy at the border, where 20 million people came over to this country, how many of those people are terrorists? How many of them were from other places that aren't of Latin descent? How many of them are from the Middle East? Did they come through? A lot. Listen, you could just walk in. Imagine the 9/11 terrorists who got themselves on planes and figured out how to, and again, there's a lot of stories about how that really happened. There's no footage of them in the airports. Was it an inside job? All kinds of, I'm not even getting into that. They got on the planes. They got into the country. They took flight school in Minnesota and learned how to fly the jets right here in the U.S. These people, we don't even know they're here. These people have gone to the border and gone through a hole in a fence and walked into Texas with coordination. People waiting for them to pick them. Those people have backup here in the U.S. Those people coordinated everything. They have cell phones. They have communications with the people that are all in a well-organized terrorist cell. They're here. They've proven some of them have come over the border. They're catching up to them. They're going to get them. The ICE will definitely get these guys out of here eventually. But this has to happen, man. This has to happen. So I'm going to conclude the show. Obviously, you know where I stand with it. But listen, I want to know what you're thinking. I want to know your concerns. I want you to post questions. I'm going to go in today and I'm going to start to answer some of the queries that people put up there. And I'm going to start to address people more. But I also want to know, listen, right, if you would want to come on the show, private message us and tell us if you can on the Facebook or whatever the social media platform that you're watching the show on. And just let me know what your thoughts are. I'm not one of those people that want you to sugarcoat it with me and say, oh, Dan, you're doing so great. And, oh, Dan, I believe it. You want to write something that's good. But I want to hear from the people that don't agree with me, too. I'm happy to have you on the show. I'm happy to take a call with you on the show. I'm happy to take a video from you where you ask me a question and you give me permission. I'll put the video on and then I'll answer your question. That's a great format. So send me something that you're concerned about. Send me your opinion on what's going on. Send me options of things that we could be doing that, maybe we could get some national attention for if you have some better ways to do this, because I think we're doing what he said he was going to do. And I think we're on the path to healing and getting this right. But I'm more than willing to, if I'm wrong or you prove to me or you sway me in a different way, come on. I want to hear it. I'm open, man. I don't think I have all the answers, that's for sure. I just know that where we have been has not been good. So something has to change. And as you know, on my show, I end every show in prayer. If prayer is not something that you like to participate in, then this is a good time to turn your monitor off. I am a Christian, a born-again Christian, and Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. And so at the end of every show, I pray. So here we go. Lord God, thank you so much for your continued guidance. Thank you so much for the abundance that you put in front of me and my family every day. Thank you so much for my beautiful wife, Deasia, and what a gift she is, and for my children, Avis and Finley and Bat. Lord, thank you so much for all of the opportunities that you've given me to try to serve you. There's so many, many, many things that I'm working on right now, as you know. And I pray for all the people that watch this show, whether you agree with me or don't agree with me. If you know the Lord, then you know the power that courses through my veins every single day. And Lord, a special prayer for those immigrants that came to this country and wanted a new way and wanted a new chance and that believe in you, Lord. Please guide them back home and bring them here the proper way, Lord, under the guidelines and the laws of our nation. And we will welcome them with open arms in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Amen. That's it, baby. Come on back in the country if you want to come in. We welcome you. You just got to do it the right way. And God is good.